Welcome to the next installment of the Adventure Club series. My name is Naomi, and I'm part of Patron Services at the Bellwood Public Library. This time of year, many of us are ready to shake off cabin fever and get out. There is too much to do and so much to consider when planning spring and summer activities. Overcrowded amusement and theme parks, blockbuster movies, mega malls, and popular restaurants. There are many ways to spend your time that will impress your friends and spend your money. I would like to make a case for taking a road less traveled. Yes, it may not impress your friends, and sometimes your pockets will have less holes burned through them, but the experience is priceless. Let's start with Chicago. There are many interesting things about Chicago. When you say Chicago, people think the Bears, Uno's Pizza, and the House of Blues. The Taste of Chicago and the annual Blues Festival are endearing events that draw visitors in the millions. Walking the streets downtown, it's easy to get lost in the visual icons of the Willis Tower, the John Hancock, and the Harold Washington Library. What? Of course I had to add a library. So not sorry. This view alone is worth the trip. And then there's the Buckingham Fountain. My kind of town, Chicago is. One can visit these places and events and think they've seen all that Chicago has to offer. Yet it has so much more. Take art, for instance. Chicago's cultural influences are everywhere, but rarely seen. Not sure what I mean? What if I said Cloudgate by Sir Anish Kapoor? Nothing? Okay, what if I said The Bean in Millennium Park? A few light bulbs came on for Chicagoans, but mention The Bean or Cloudgate anywhere else, and people have no idea what you're talking about. To be honest, I lived downstate for a while and found out about The Bean from the movie Source Code. When I moved back to the area, that was the first place I went to see if it was real. Now think about other art around Chicago, like the Picasso in Daley Plaza or the Bowman and the Spearman in Grant Park. One could spend days viewing art downtown. In fact, there are websites dedicated to just that, like Curb Chicago and Public Art in Chicago. But if you're looking for a less athletic way to view Chicago's visual culture, there's the Art Institute of Chicago. Keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that. Now imagine traveling to foreign destinations. Take France, for instance. It has Bordeaux for wine, Nice for beaches, and Dijon for mustard. Just kidding. Checking to see if you were still listening. Don't get me wrong, it's actually made there. But no, I mean Versailles. Home of palatial elegance and beautiful gardens. However, France usually conjures images of taking romantic walks down dimly lit Parisian streets. There are the number of things to do in Paris is staggering. We're going to ignore Disneyland Paris because it's hard to resist a tourist trap like that, so I'm not going to even try. Look at Disneyland in California or Disney World in Florida. I once spent Thanksgiving with family that lived near Tampa, Florida, and I was at Busch Gardens the next morning, so I'm not proud of it. It is what it is. So moving on. Let's hang out in Paris for a while, though. Take a look at this map. These are major points of interest, and this is by no means all of it. Paris's Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, and Notre Dame, these buildings here on the left, the top left, and towards the bottom on the right. All of them beautiful places in their own right, but the Louvre, this beautiful building here in the center, it's a world of its own. Let me explain. The Eiffel Tower is a definite must-see. But to be honest, I spent more time in the grounds surrounding it than in the tower itself. After you get tickets, there's this rush to get to the elevators. And like the subway during rush hour, you might have to wait a couple of cars before you get on. Or at least I did. There's different levels you can get off on, but many want the view from the top. There's so many people, it's easy to get caught in this wave, and before you know it, you're being ushered around and then back towards the elevators, and then you're going down. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I did. It was an experience, but the only pictures I got were from the bottom. The Arc de Triomphe, is it worth a look-see? Definitely. But look at that traffic, and that's the picture on the right. Yes, the struggle is real, especially during midday. But they do have ways for pedestrians to get through without getting run over. I must admit, this site impressed me. Not so much its presence as its significance. Like Arlington National Cemetery in the U.S., it has an eternal flame and tomb of the unknown soldier. It serves in remembrance of those that gave their lives in service to their country. It is very moving. But it also pays to remember this monument is in the middle of a very busy traffic circle, and like the tower, there's no desire to linger. So now let's move to the Church of Our Lady, the Grand Notre Dame. Pictures do not do her justice. If you visit, definitely plan ahead of time. Why? This is not just a tourist attraction. It is a working church. In fact, the time I went, they were near the end of Mass. We waited until they were done, and even when they let us in, we had to walk quietly along the outside of the main floor while worshipers prayed after service. The other areas were closed that day, and they weren't allowing tours. But they were nice enough to give us pamphlets with the tour schedules and the prices just in case we wanted to come back another day. Unfortunately, we couldn't because our tour was leaving for the next city that day. And I kind of felt like an interloper or some kind of weird voyeur. It's still worth a visit though. Just plan. They do have a dress code, so be mindful what you wear. Also consider that since the fire, many of their rules may have changed. Now I have a confession. The Louvre is a popular tourist spot. It's one of the few art museums in the world that is actually on tourist destinations list. I took an educational tour and it was actually on our itinerary. However, it often takes a backseat to the sites that I mentioned before. And those that do drop in make the mistake of treating it like an afterthought. That's due to one lady, the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. People think they'll walk in, take a few snaps, and give a cursory look at the other fair, and then move on. However, you could spend an entire week in the Louvre and not see everything. I am not exaggerating. Let's take a look at the map and get an idea of the scope of this museum. Now, where this is taking us is to the Louvre's main website. I created a link that took me right to the page for the floor plans. Okay, scrolling down, you'll notice that it has 4 floors worth of exhibits. That's not even mentioning the shops, refreshment areas, and restaurants. It's big. They do have places for you to rest, and I suggest you take advantage of it. If you notice how the floors are labeled, they are different than what you're used to. In this map, ground level, which is the 0 here on the left, the bottom left, the ground level is labeled 0 instead of 1 like it is in the US. And then their first floor, which is on the top right, would normally be our second floor in the US. That's a European thing, not just limited to the Louvre or France. I would say that it's a hard, fast rule, but there are exceptions to everything. Just keep that in mind when you're navigating European buildings. But going back to the map, take note of the names like Richelieu and Sully and Denon, and the colors, which you can see here. This little blue and the yellow and the green and I believe red. If I'm not mistaken, no, I'm sorry. Where'd I go? Oh, the museum named the wings to help visitors stay oriented. Sorry, I got a little lost there. And it's very easy to get turned around. I don't know how many times I've found myself backtracking. And if I'm not mistaken, the colors represent the type of art you'll find in each section. So this little yellow section that's on the bottom left, that's Near Eastern Antiquities. And I know it's hard to read on this map, but if you actually go to the website, you can zoom in. And this bottom blue color, that's Roman Antiquities. And if you can see this red on the right, that is paintings of Northern Europe. So that's just a quick, brief look at what you can find using the map and kind of get an idea of the scope on how big this is. I know this looks small, but believe me, you're talking about miles of worth of walking. Now going back to the presentation. Please don't think that this museum is limited to just rooms and rooms of classical paintings. As you saw on the map, there are entire rooms, wings, and floors dedicated to things like Egyptian antiquities, like Akhenaten and Nefertiti here, and modern art like Long de Midi or The Midway Day Wave by Elias Crispin. Of course, there's much, 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 much more than this. I'll say it again, the Louvre is big. You'll hear me talk about this repeatedly during this presentation, but plan as much as you can before you visit sites, especially ones like this one. If you can get tickets ahead of time, do. I've been to the Louvre twice. The first time was with friends, and we thought we'd just pop right in, look around, then leave. Yes, I was one of those people. We were in line for over an hour just to get tickets, and then there was a line to get in. The second time was with a tour group, 30 minutes, and we bypassed the line to get in. That said, times will vary depending on the time of year. That's why planning can be such a big help. And since it's so big, get a hold of the map as early as you can. You can plan where you go so you can at least see what you want first, then fill in the rest as you have time. Once you get into the heart of the Louvre, crowds tend to thin out. People tend to congregate around the more famous exhibits, so there's plenty of room to get lost. If the Louvre is too much, and it can be, believe me, there's the Musée d'Orsay. Yes, there's another art museum in Paris. It's just enough to satisfy the visual sweet tooth without leaving you exhausted by the end of the day. And it only takes about an afternoon or so. Definitely worth a look if you want something to fill time or you don't want to deal with the crowds at the Louvre. Oh, and an afterthought, both museums have guided and audio-assisted tours. And yes, they're available in English. Both services cost extra, and though audio is cheaper since it's self-guided, something to consider. Now let's head over to Italy. One can say this whole country is one big art museum. Rome alone can keep you busy with sites like the Vatican and the Colosseum. I haven't actually been to Rome, and I know there's a lot to see. We had a couple of people who broke off from our educational tour to visit Rome, since it wasn't on our regular itinerary, or the itinerary that they came up for the trip anyway. They spent 2 days there and barely got to see anything. There was so much. Plus, they had the extra frustration of getting around without the aid of our tour guide. So yes, planning people. But they did have a good time, and even with a few hiccups, they were able to meet up with the group and tell us of their adventures. There's also Venice. I used to think those water taxis were just for show. Granted, the pretty ones with the decorations, costumes, and singing are definitely for tourists and special occasions. But to get around Venice, you really need a boat. Some areas do have bridges, but they can take you out of your way. It's easier to go by boat. The water table is so high that certain times of the year they have to build wooden walkways just so people can stay dry as they walk from building to building. The time I visited was at the tail end of flooding for that season. It was a couple of weeks before the Carnival of Venice, so maybe March or April timeframe. Yes, definitely missed out on that one. I would have loved to seen everyone walking around all dressed up in their costumes. But I did get to see St. Mark's Basilica. The floor was a little wet, but it was still beautiful. And with the flooding, they weren't holding mass, so there was that. And then there's Pisa, home of the infamous Leaning Tower. That tower is all about perspective, and I'm sure you've seen the various photos of people holding it up and all of that. But you could take hundreds of pictures around it, and it will look different every time. They do have tours, not only of the tower, but also the church next to it. I only did the tower tour. Definitely worth it. The acoustics are phenomenal. If you're into architectural design, you'll be there all day. Despite the lean in the tower and its accompanying church are feats of engineering. But if we're talking famous art, though, who can forget Michelangelo's David? Absolutely no one, because there are replicas all over Italy and all over the world for that matter. But the most famous one is in Florence. Like Paris, there are many sights to see. Maybe not as many as Paris, but plenty to get your tired dogs barking by the end of the day. Please forgive my pronunciations, because if you thought my French was bad, my Italian is even worse. But here we go. At the top of the map, you know the Galleria dell'Accademia. There's Santa Croce Basilica, which is on the right-hand side, a little lower than center, or right center. There's Palazzo Vecchio, which is towards the center. And I'm not sure why it's not shown on this map, but there's the Ponte Vecchio, which is this bridge here right over the Arno River. And nestled in between it, you'll notice this pretty little building here. That's the Uffizi Gallery, but we'll come back to that. And yes, I know there are more sites on this map, but I didn't make it that far, so I don't really feel comfortable discussing those, but definitely worth a look-see. Any place you go is worth taking a view of the map just to see where you want to go. But anyway, I kind of stayed in this little area here because, one, that was more than enough for me. I was really tired. And I kind of wish we had more time, but we only had the afternoon to look around. But that's okay, because we wouldn't have made it to the Uffizi otherwise. People come from all over the world to see David. He's housed in the Galleria Accademia. And if you notice, he's so nice, they got him twice, because he's also outside the door when you come in, just to the left of this picture anyway. Um, he was outside our exploration area, so I didn't get to see him personally. I did see many replicas in Florence, though, so I kind of felt like I saw him. But serious people, he was everywhere. But still, I got gypped. Yeah, planning, people. A little planning goes a long, long way. But if you haven't had your fill of churches, because there are so many in Europe, there's Santa Croce. Hold on to your wallets in this area, though. There are a lot of shops along in this section. There's food, clothing, gifts, and more. Thankfully, I had limited spending money, or I could have taken half of Florence home with me. And did I mention this area is known for their leather? So, yeah, back to the church. I got some pictures of the outside, but that was about it. It was closed the day we went, so I can't speak to that experience. Did I mention planning? Anyway, fortunately, while we were getting from place to place, I couldn't help but enjoy the beautiful sculptures, gardens, and architecture along the Palazzo Vecchio and the Ponte Vecchio. Unfortunately, we didn't plan rest stops. Whatever you do, don't sit on the fountains or the statues. They actually have people that will make you move. There are benches, but they don't accommodate the number of people that come through there. And make sure you have money for the public bathrooms, because you can't willy-nilly use shops or restaurants bathrooms like we do in the U.S. Just saying. But as my mom and I were wandering aimlessly, we did find this little gem, the Uffizi Museum. It's easy to miss as it blends into the background unless you know what to look for. And in our case, it was a line of people disappearing into nowhere. Okay, so let's go to the map. For some reason, I didn't really plan for that in my script. I'm not sure what happened there. But anyway, again, like I did for the Louvre, this isn't the Uffizi's official site. This is a site that actually helps you set up and plan your visit to the Uffizi. And if you scroll down, you'll notice that it has 2 floors. And like the Musée d'Orsay, it can be completed in an afternoon or so. And although there are lines, they're not as long, or at least not as long as the Louvre anyway, relatively. And also, like Parisian museums, you can get guided and audio-assisted tours. But to be honest, I didn't use the map during the visit, and it looks like it's also color-coded, so you can see the blues, the greens, the browns, and the reds. And the rooms are numbered, and scrolling down shows the legend, which has the room numbers, and then a detailed description of their contents. There's not as much variety as the Louvre, but it's definitely worth a visit. Now going back to the presentation again. What's this museum's claim to fame? Sandro Botticelli's Birth of Venus. I remember this picture in and on many of my school books. Not sure why though. Many of them weren't even art related. But anyway, like I said, the Uffizi isn't as big as the Louvre, but it does have different sections like Roman Antiquities, which has statues like Sleeping Arrows here, and modern art, like Alberto Burri's Bianco Nero, which is basically translated to black and white. So what does all of that have to do with Chicago? Besides the sites I mentioned earlier, people will visit the Shedd Aquarium, the Field Museum, and the Adler Planetarium, all part of the main museum campus. We get asked about those museums all the time at the library. However, museums off campus, like the Museum of Science and Industry and the Art Institute, barely even get a side glance. I invite you to give the Art Institute a try. Why? Let's look at the map again. And this is also taking me to the Art Institute main website, to their floor plan section. And give me just a second to download it. It doesn't take long. Scrolling down, you'll notice that there's 4 floors worth of exhibits. There's paintings, sketches, statues, photography, classic art, modern art, cultural pieces, and you name it. It's as eclectic as the city itself. Oh, let me scroll through here some more. Yeah, there's a lot on here, as well as, things to look for, their hours and all of that. Going back to the presentation. What is this library? What is this museum famous for? It contains famous art like Claude Monet's water lilies, and lesser known art like Richard Hunt's Hero Construction and Beza Butler's I Know the Caged Bird Sings. And if I remember, they used to hold day classes and programs. So that's a perfect excuse to check out their website to see what they offer. It might actually surprise you. In fact, I encourage you to check out the websites of all the museums I listed in this presentation. Most have photos of featured exhibits, and see if they have something that appeals to you. All 3 even have virtual tours. There are fees associated with these tours, but it might be worth it just to see if it's worth your time. All of this is not to say that you should spend your summer looking at art. I wanted to show that there are other amazing sites and activities beyond the popular fare. Before you embark on your next adventure, make sure you take time to do a bit of research and plan ahead as much as you can. There are many resources, websites, and books to help. Need some help? Visit your local library. A few things to keep in mind. If this is the first time you're traveling somewhere and you don't speak the language, I would suggest using guided tours like EF Educational Tours. My mom and I signed up for a class at Triton that used EF Tours. The destination varies from class to class. It made the trip considerably cheaper and included travel fees, lodging, breakfast, and dinner. Usually the afternoons were open to explore on your own. Otherwise, you have an itinerary for the rest of the day, and they choose a variety of activities so you could find something you enjoy. The drawback, besides the limited itinerary choices, is you have to share the tour with other school groups. They try to keep the age groups similar, but there's no guarantee. Check with your local community colleges to see if they have any continuing education courses that allow for travel. There's also travel groups. These are social groups, online or otherwise, like the Travel Divas, whose reason for being is to get a group together to travel. Some groups are actually headed by travel agents who like group travel. Group travel is cheaper, and organizers have the experience to help you avoid many travel pitfalls and get you deals that might not be available if you were on your own. There's also the option of a travel agent, but keep in mind this will cost you. The benefit is you get a trip tailored the way you want it. You choose your itinerary, you choose your free time, and when and where you want to eat and where to stay. A really good agent will also let you know what to bring with you, how to avoid normal travel pitfalls, and places to contact or go in case of emergency. Now, if you're traveling the first time and you know the language, you have a little more leeway. You can use local travel agencies, and when I mean local to the area that you're going to visit, or local travel advisors. This will cost you, again, but it saves time and helps narrow down your experience to activities that interest you. They can also arrange for tickets and transportation. My mom arranged a trip to Grand Junction, Colorado. She arranged the activities through a travel advisor in Grand Junction. We didn't have to worry about anything, like how we were going to get from place to place or standing in line for tickets or any of that. The organizer handled everything. We pretty much just showed up and had fun. My mom also added an open day that we used to wander around Grand Junction. And that was about the most effort we put in the whole trip. It was so much fun. If you're set on setting everything up yourself, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, be sure to do your homework. Yes, your local library can help, she says, as she uses it as another excuse to plug the library. Plug. Also consider visitor centers. Some are even online. The cool thing about them is they usually have more up-to-date information, and they tend to include less popular attractions that can be missed by mainstream travel guides. There are also websites that can walk you through planning trips and scheduling events in one convenient place. Now, if you visited a place before, plan according to your comfort level. At this point, you know what to expect, you know what places and events will give you issues and which ones will be cakewalks. You've gathered information, you've made contacts. Hopefully you've learned what not to do, and you can spend more time enjoying your trip and activities instead of trying to get from one step to the next. Also leave room for a little spontaneity. This is the real fun part for me. Because another benefit of knowing what to expect is you can fit in things you missed the previous time, or take chances where you were too scared or too inconvenienced to do before. However you choose to do it, do not travel without a plan. And I'm not just talking about overseas or exotic destinations. These trips include places like Six Flags or activities downtown for that matter. Make a plan. It doesn't matter how simple the activity or the event is. No plan may result in wasted time, money, and a whole lot of headaches. Imagine trying to find the sculptures downtown without a plan. You'll get your feelings hurt, and it's not a good look. Anyway, enough of being a mother hen. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Here are some resources that I used to make it happen. I hope it inspires you to investigate some of the things mentioned here. Yes, I know much of the information is vague, and that's actually on purpose. Trips and activities, or trip and activity planning, is personal and unique to you, and it's a journey you need to take. Yes, I can tell you all the things I've done, but it may not resonate with you. Like I featured art, but art may not be your thing. I prefer travel groups. Maybe groups aren't your thing. I like things planned out for me. Maybe you're meticulous and prefer to plan things yourself. And you know what? That's part of the point. Journeys do not start when you hit the road. They start with an idea that becomes action. So make a plan, grab that hat, and lace up those shoes. I'll see you out there.